It's time for another edition of the JPGivin'er analysis, baby! I've gotten quite a few requests to analyze some lower division gameplay, so today, I'll be analyzing Immortal Man's perspective in a match between Storm Rush Gaming and MSF. And as always, if you want me to analyze your gameplay, join my Discord server and let me know. I only have a couple locks for perspectives at the moment, so if you submit yours soon, you could get an analysis within the next month or so. The submission process is in the description, but regardless, let's start giving her, bud. Just before getting started, if you enjoy this video, consider subscribing. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind. Starting things off, we got Twisted Mansion. Immortal Man had a pretty easy run for the most part since a ton of SRG were also up in the front to support him. Even so, I think there are still a few general points to bring up. And of course, most times I say you, I'm referring to Immortal Man. Alright, Immortal Man, I think you had the right intentions here. This is a super tight spot on the track, so you wanted to take advantage of that in order to take the guy in front of you out. But in general, you didn't consider enough variables here. You threw the green to the right of the guy, so right away you had a lesser chance of hitting him. Try to aim in the direction of the turn next time, which would be left in this case. You'll have a much better shot at letting green snipes this way. Additionally, I think you should have made sure that the opponent behind you didn't pull a red. You knew he was behind you, but you didn't take a look at what he got as an item before throwing your only protection item away. I know he didn't get anything to take you out, but you didn't know that before trying to hit the guy in front of you. If he got a red, he would have eventually taken you out. And lastly, yeah, your green almost hit you here. I think unless you know for sure you'll land a hit on a tight turn like this, you should never throw a green forward here. Another example of this is on Wario Stadium. By throwing a green forward on the beginning turns, it's a recipe for disaster. But yeah, the point is, you've got to be a bit more patient before attempting to play the aggressor in a tight section like this. There were variables that you didn't consider that could have screwed you over. So at this point, not a whole lot happened this race worth going over. However, while we're here, you do have a Shroom in first, and you made it very clear to your mates that if one of them pulled a blue, to chuck it immediately. While there is a good chance it'll help the guy catch up, you have to consider other scenarios here. There are three big factors to consider when dealing with a blue with a Shroom in first: a ghost, a shock, and the remainder of the race in general. Your Shroom is in your first slot, so there's a chance it could be stolen before you would be able to dodge a blue, like how it got stolen later on in the race. There's also a chance that the other team could come in with a shock of their own before you can dodge a blue and after your invincibility frames are done protecting you. And lastly, let's say your teammate pulled a blue second set lap 2 and chucked it immediately. There's a chance that the other team could pull a blue of their own before the race is over. This isn't to say you should hold blues no matter what, but these are things to consider. This is why when you watch some of my older videos, you might be hearing me say to one of my teammates to hold blue even though I have a Shroom or a Horn in first, just to ensure that the other team won't screw us over in any way, shape, or form. I'd say if one of your mates is holding a ghost or just used one and you still have your Shroom, that's probably a safe call to throw blue. But for the future, if your mate pulls a blue and you have a Shroom in first, just be aware of how you could get screwed over by telling your mate to throw it. Now, I know you didn't hit your mate, but what if you did? In the worst case scenario regarding the war, that could be the difference between your team winning or losing. I'm sure this was just an accident, but you did seem a little complacent here, thinking that your team was good to go for the remainder of the race with nothing to worry about. I won't go any further than that since there isn't a ton of depth in this point in general. Just be aware that the race isn't over till it's over. Other than that, nice group run. Next up is Mount Wario. This was a pretty interesting race, with Immortal Man missing out on some opportunities, as well as making some general mistakes, but not enough to ruin his race, so he played alright. Now, I find it pretty interesting that you held your shroom here, considering most people would opt to shroom through the beginning snow cut. Back in 2017, I used to hold my shroom from this set until the section 2 snow cut, but yeah, there's too much track between the first set and that shortcut to make it worth it. I think considering you were able to keep up with the front for most of this race, had you shroomed at the beginning, there's a good chance you could have avoided what you eventually got hit by. Here are the lines I take if I'm unsure if I'll get a shroom or not, so try to replicate this if you're unsure and want to get into the front immediately. Alright, so in most cases on other tracks, you could easily space away from the bananas in front of you, but specifically on this part of the track, trying to go wide or space could really screw you over even if you don't get hit. My guess as to why you tricked here was to either make sure you would successfully fall down to the waterfall section or push ahead of the guy with triple bananas. Either way, yeah, he caught up right quick and trailed you like it's another day in the office. I think the approach is exclusive to these turns or any similar turns on other tracks, but I think you should have given the guy in front of you a lot more space before drifting into section 2. You could have used your rear view, which you should do a bit more of that in general, to check and see how close the people behind you were. Then, if it was safe, you could have slowed down and you would likely be safe from the guy's bananas. Unfortunately, there isn't an optimal approach to this part of the track given your situation, so take what I just told you with a grain of salt, and maybe you'll come out on top next time, who knows? So this was a 1-for-1 hit for both teams here. However, you could have hit them and not your teammate in the process. You never told your mate that you were going to try to hit the guy in second or even when you backed the boomerang. I think communicating your moves that certain teammates need to hear about is something you should work towards improving in general, as you also backed a green in the section 2 snow cut despite your teammate being right behind you. I think if you can improve this, both you and your team will be able to generally perform a bit better. Nothing happened worth mentioning after this bit, so yeah, good job on nailing first. Lastly, we have Donut Plains 3. Immortal Man opted to bag this race, and he played pretty well. I'll go over how he approached the final stage of the race and why it worked out the way it did in his favor. But before getting into the juicy part of the race, here's a little something I want to talk about. You could tell that the guy in front of you wasn't going for the wide doubles, and you had a ton of time to make sure you got it. Because you were already in the back, there was no real rush to catch up to the pack, so you could have slowed down and ensured that you got 2 items at this set. It's not a big deal in this race, but situationally, it can make a huge difference nabbing 2 items, especially at this set in this situation. Now, chaining your star into the first set was a great idea. You were pretty much guaranteed 2 power items, and considering you were already on your way to catching back up, chaining here was a solid idea. It sucked that you got a golden in your first set, but I'm happy you didn't try to chain into the second set and instead tried to optimize your golden to the best of your ability given your situation in the race. I guess the only scenario where you'd want to spam your golden right away is if you wanted to try and get shock, but your team didn't need it. Although maybe you should have made sure the guy behind you didn't have a shock before pushing up. Just a thought. Item-wise, I think you still played this part of the race pretty nicely. Overall, given the cards you were dealt, you played them pretty well. You once again changed your star into the first set, and the fact that you got a bill was a game changer, especially considering you previously suspected that the other team had shock. Now, while you did use your bill a bit after your star right out, I still think you used it in a solid spot. Considering the other team didn't use their shock shortly after you passed the first set, it was inevitable that if they had a shock, it would come through shortly after you passed the second set. However, I think chaining invincibility would have been the best option for you to cover all of your bases here, as an option for the other team could have been to shock you out of your star. Had you used your bill immediately, even if you didn't dodge, which would be really surprising honestly, the other team would hesitate even more more, so it would be a win-win for your team in regards to potentially limiting the damage done. That's just an option though. Overall, great job on the dodge usage lap 3, ensuring that you dodged the shock regardless of when it came. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And for Immortal Man, I think some steps towards improvement would be to use your rear view more often in tight situations, as well as to call out some of your item plays more in advance so your team can act accordingly. These are the general things to take away from this. Of course, you have every other small thing I've mentioned in this video as well, but I do believe you can take your gameplay to the next level, so good luck. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and keep on giving her, bud.